Opening the center immediately establishes central control and prepares for rapid development of pieces. Immediately challenging white's central pawn, this knight maneuver signals a flexible response, aiming for rapid piece development and potential counterplay on the queen side. Asserting central dominion, c4 immediately challenges black's knight and creates dynamic pawn tensions. Preparing to contest the center, black solidifies their pawn structure and opens diagonals for the bishop. Developing the knight to c3 now supports the central pawns and prepares for kingside castling, building a solid foundation. Fulfilling a pivotal role, the bishop immediately stakes a claim on the long diagonal, dictating central pawn structures and offering an early tactical challenge. Solidifying the center with pawns paves the way for piece development and controls crucial squares. Securing the monarch is paramount. Now look to develop your remaining pieces actively. Anchoring the bishop here supports a central pawn push and prepares for kingside development. Challenging the center immediately, this thrust injects vital counterplay and prepares for a more dynamic pawn structure. Challenging black's bishop with space gains, preparing for potential pawn advances. Abandoning the center allows white to seize more space and potentially launch a kingside attack. Clearing the bishop to its active diagonal now pressures black's central pawn structure. Reclaiming the pawn, black repositions the bishop to a more active diagonal, eyeing kingside prospects. Developing the knight to its natural outpost enhances piece coordination, bolstering central influence and preparing for potential kingside action. Developing the knight to d7 secures the center and prepares to support e5, aiming for a more dynamic pawn structure. Expanding queenside territory with b4 seeks to gain space, potentially restricting black's bishop development and creating queenside play. Boldly challenging the center, black ignites a sharp pawn struggle, forcing white to address the immediate spatial imbalance. Anchoring the bishop on the long diagonal aims to support the queenside pawn push and potentially pressure black's center. Unleashing a pawn storm, black seeks to disrupt white's central foothold and gain dynamic play. Knight retreats strategically repositions to support the central pawn advance and prepare for a queenside counterplay. This knight's flight opens lines and seeks central influence, potentially forcing a reshuffle of white's pieces. Stabilizing the bishop on its diagonal prepares for a potential kingside pawn storm or reassures its safety. Centralizing the queen aims to support the knight's advance and prepare for queenside play. Unleashing a pawn storm, white aims to seize the initiative on the kingside, potentially exposing black's monarch. Solidifying the central outpost, this knight aims to disrupt white's ambitious kingside expansion by offering a robust defensive structure and potential counterplay. A bold thrust, seeking to cramp black's position and potentially launch a kingside assault. This audacious pawn sacrifice ignites a dynamic tactical storm, forcing white's king into a precarious central position. Cracking open the kingside to expose the monarch, white embraces a sharp, potentially decisive gambit for a strong initiative. Liberating the knight from its passive outpost on b6, this pawn-grabbing knight now aims to disrupt white's cramped queenside. Unlocking the knight from the pawn chain, this exchange aims to exploit black's awkward piece placement. Unleashing the queen here sacrifices development for immediate pressure, hoping to exploit the exposed white king. Unleashing a discovered attack, white pierces black's tangled queenside structure with immediate tactical consequence. Reclaiming the pawn immediately simplifies the position, creating active piece play and a more open game for black. Unlocking the f-file opens dangerous attacking possibilities against black's exposed king. Securing the king on the king's side, away from the pawn storm and potential open files, seems like a prudent step. Seizing the open file, white initiates a strategic assault, aiming to dismantle black's weakened pawn structure and expose the king. Reclaiming material, black now shores up the central pawn chain, preparing to develop the queenside. Castling finally addresses king safety, a rather pressing concern after the prior pawn storm. Sacrificing the bishop's influence here allows for a potential queenside counterplay. Preparing to dominate the f-file with immense pressure, as the king's safety is seriously compromised. Reactivating the rook on the central file offers much-needed activity for black's diminished forces. Focusing on the central space, this queen redeployment aims to connect the rooks and prepare for an assault on black's somewhat exposed king. Targeting the queen directly, black aims to disrupt white's coordination and exploit the now open king's diagonal. Opening the e-file now offers promising attacking prospects, potentially targeting black's exposed monarch. Relocating the rook to a more active file, this maneuver aims to exploit the d-file and put pressure on white's central pawn structure. Breaching the queenside pawns offers a dynamic, open avenue for your rooks to penetrate the enemy's defenses. Unleashing a desperate thunderbolt, this aggressive foray into the enemy camp aims to disrupt white's queenside harmony and seize initiative. Securing the king behind the pawn shield is paramount now, preventing further threats from the active black pieces. This repositioning of the queen directly threatens the now exposed white king, forcing a defensive reaction and opening new attacking avenues. This repositioning of the queen aggressively pressures black's beleaguered monarch, aiming to exploit the weakened dark squares and potential mating nets. Souls, your king is getting exposed by this pawn push. Time to bolster its defenses. Asserting the open king's file with the rook, threatening the queen and setting up a potential invasion. Sacrificing material to expose the king's haven is a bold gambit, aiming to unravel white's defense through open lines. Securing the king's safety against immediate threats opens up possibilities, but leaves the pawn structure somewhat compromised. Unlocking the e-file offers your rooks a new avenue for assault against the exposed monarch. Retreating the monarch allows it to sidestep the immediate pressure on the king side, aiming for greater safety in the center. Creating a pawn chain bulwark to shield the monarch, though it might constrict piece mobility later. Reclaiming the important central file offers white a chance to finally activate their beleaguered rooks. Unleashing the bishop redirects pressure, aiming to disrupt the enemy's rook on the open file and challenge white's king's safety. Sacrificing the bishop opens the g-file, potentially exposing the black king or creating powerful attacking opportunities along the newly cleared path. Regaining material and activating your queen is a tactical imperative now. Asserting central control now, the queen vacates the d-file, preparing a decisive pressure along the open lines.